Hey, everybody. Good afternoon. My name is Zico Singleton. I'm going to get the gentlemen on this panel to introduce themselves. Let me start with Mark Taylor.
Hi, my name is Mark Taylor. I'm an addiction clinician. I work with River City Comprehensive Counseling Services.
Hello, my name is Anthony Hayden. I go by Amp Lamvan. I am the current reigning Mr. Virginia Pride. I work for Help Brigade as a Ryan White outreach specialist, case manager. I have been in the field for about 25 years, and I don't mix my old title with the new title, but I am so happy to be here.
Hi, everybody. My name is Darius Pryor. I'm the HIV Testing and Prevention Program Manager at Health Brigade. I have been in prevention now myself for about 11 years. And yeah, that's who I am as an introduction. There you go. What he said. Does not apply.
Good afternoon. I'm Jihad Aziz. I'm the Director of University Counseling Services here at VCU and also the Director of Psychological Service for Athletics. So I've been at VCU for about 25, 23 years. So been around for a little bit. So glad to be here. Looking forward to the conversation and being amongst these brothers and the sister who's leading it. So thank you all.
Thank you. So, some backstory to the panel. Mark and I, this is my person. This is my sweetie pie. We were leaving dinner one night, and we were standing in the, this microphone feels kind of pretentious, but okay. We were standing in a parking lot after dinner, and I think I was about to go to a conference or something, and it sparked a conversation between us. Zico, I'm so proud of you, the opportunities that you get. You know, you're still so early in your career, and just so many things are opening up for you. And I realized that in that moment, he wasn't getting the shine and the spotlight that he deserves for his work. And I know why that is. I'm less intimidating. I'm less threatening. These men, you know, in spite of progress, they're still weaponized and villainized. So we're going to start there. So we're going to get into this conversation. I have some really, really hard-hitting journalistic questions. But this is an overdue conversation, and the fact that we have to have these conversations, and I can't stand that word conversations, but this is what this is, so we're going to get into it. So I think my first one is going to be Jihad. How can we address the stigma surrounding mental health within the Black community, particularly among Black men, and promote open dialogue about emotional well-being and seeking support?
All right, so this is going to take about 3 hours. So everybody just be comfortable. So I think, let's just say part of that starts with these conversations that we're having now, of having people who represent Black men to be able to talk about the issues that impact Black men. But we can't we can't forget about structural racism that has an impact on identity, and as well as history and trauma that impacts people's ability to function and engage in society in some meaningful way. I think too often we see stereotypical images of, especially on social media, of what Black men are, what they do, how they interact, and then that shapes people's ideas of how we're treated and people engage us. And also, the other impact is how we internalize that. I was having a conversation with a young person today, and we were talking about sort of like, how African American men, and sometimes men in general, can grow up in what we define as the honor culture, in which you have to respect me, but we define respect differently. So one of the things he said, he was working with youth, and he said they would feel disrespected over the most pettiest thing in the world. When I articulated, it was like, this is the same thing we talk about violence prevention, is there's no such thing as senseless violence because the person who committed it made perfect sense. So what you define as petty, they define as important. But if I judged it and devalued it, then I missed the point of how do I connect with you to help change it. So if we're talking about well-being of men of color, African-American men, we're talking about really understanding who they are and where they come from. So how do you immerse yourself in understanding, how do you connect with them in ways that are healthy and beneficial? The other piece is like, what are the work we need to do as men of color? How do we express ourselves and be more vulnerable? Vulnerable in a way that we allow ourselves to connect with one another without people feeling like we have to share everything, but being open about of what's going on. One of the, what do we teach our children? Before I pass this on, I'll say this real quick. So my son and I, his friend and I, we were coming from an AU basketball game, and his girlfriend broke up with him. Of course, they did it via text. I was like, really? This is how we're doing it? But he cried. And the first thing his friend said was, don't cry, don't cry. This was his way of comforting them. So part of his understanding, this was how he thought he would comfort him, is by saying, don't cry. And my role was not to say, hey, don't do that, it's okay to cry. It's okay. You can shed the tears because you feel hurt. And then we can go from there. But part of it is understanding that I'm not upset with his friend because he was trying to comfort. He just didn't know how. And I think oftentimes we don't know how to help black men because we haven't taken the time to figure that piece out. So let me turn it over. I don't know if anybody else has something to say.
Thank you for that.
Okay.
I appreciate it. I think you answered the whole question for me. Thanks for coming. Thank you. Thanks for coming to our TED Talk. but yeah, of course.
So thank you for your comment, and thank you for creating this space for us to come and share our experiences. I think it's safe to say that Jihad and I are in the same generation, right? So I remember growing up during those times where my father and older cousins and, the males in my family, you better not cry. I better not see you cry, or I'm gonna give you something to cry for, right? And so, when you talked about that really gives a good backdrop on like my experiences and the things that I've been through and how I handle myself from childhood, my teenage years, and young adulthood, and to now. So, I'm just grateful that I ended up in this space of mental health. It won't by choice. I started VCU in '83 when the Commons was just opening, right? And my goal was to be a CPA. I had no goal to do anything in social work, psychology, anything like that. Active addiction disrupted that goal and that dream for that period of time. So when I finally, like the gentleman before us, Kevin, talked about different goals and different values that had changed for me, I got myself together and came back to school, and I did get my undergrad in 2005. But during that time frame, it was still me having to navigate a whole lot of stuff, if you understand what I mean. And he talked about prison. I'm a person with a convicted felon, and I have a history too. So it's all of those things that connects for me. And, now I get to do this type of work, and I get to help others that's coming behind me who are struggling in that area. So, again, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. Thank you. I have one. Let me get to the middle. So I work at Health Brigade as well. I'm one of the supervisors for the harm reduction program. And I have this beautiful experience of being able to work with the two gentlemen in the middle. And so the intersections of HIV, Hep C testing, chemsex, Google that when you get home, it's a thing. And just the way that we provide services allows me to work really closely with AMP and Darius. So here we go. Darius, let me ask you this. how do you approach HIV testing and counseling in a way that is sensitive to the unique experiences and needs of Black gay individuals, considering the intersecting factors of race, sexual orientation, and the stigma associated with all of the things?
So, to answer that question, I think I have to reflect a little bit on my experiences as a Black, gay, positive male doing the prevention work. I think when I first started, I've always come to testing with the humanity and the humbleness or the personable approach. You know, I like to have conversations. I like for the people that come and seek our services to feel comfortable because they're coming to us in need. A lot of times people are coming because they're not feeling so well, sexually speaking, or downstairs. And while they think something is going on or they may know something is going on, the thing about HIV is that it being an opportunistic infection, it's often not what is bringing them to us. So HIV, while we're doing the test, they're not considering it. So having to give that information or give that diagnosis in that moment, someone's life is changing. Their reality is changing. But for me, it comes from my own experiences, but also kind of keeping in mind all the different trainings that I've gone through. You know, when we talk about intersectionality and when we talk about just prevention in general, we often talk about social determinants of health. But like Mark has said just a moment ago, and Dr. McCall, he's a doctor, right? Okay. Didn't, okay. Hate mistitling people, but like he also mentioned, there's so much that goes into our human experience. And each and every time I get a client in front of me, I have to remember that I don't know this person's entire story. All I know is that right now in this moment, they are seeking these services because something is going on that moved them to this point. Because a lot of times it goes unchecked. It goes unchecked, it goes untested, it goes undiagnosed. So for them to even get to this point, something is going on and they are in need. And to not lose the sensitivity of that or to lose the humanity of this person seeking help for something that they don't understand. So then as an educator, it's my job and my pleasure to present the information in a way that's digestible, that's retainable. It's not too, over the top. This is what is going on and this is what the situation is. And each and every time I have to give that diagnosis or give that news, I have to ground myself in my own experience and remind myself of what it felt like, but also what may be needed to get someone through that moment. And as we talked about, again, as Kevin had discussed, housing is the biggest barrier to any type of change. When we talk about medical change or behavioral change, housing, you have to be stably housed, but outside of that, also just kind of the readiness and kind of gauging where someone is to kind of help them along is really a big part of all of that. But I really try to stay grounded and make sure that the person doesn't feel like the number that sometimes we have to report them as, making sure that they feel seen, feel valued, and feel helped by the time they leave.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And I'm gonna kind of segue into this question for you too, because of the same work that y'all do, right? But because AMP is Mr. Virginia Pride 2023, right? I talk about it all the time. I post about it, like that's my boo. So let me ask you this, because, ballroom culture, this is not a new thing amongst the Black community, right? Like, if you know, you know. But I think, bless you, I think mainstream media, social media has given more of a little bit of oomph to it. So let's talk about your ballroom experiences, right? Talk to me about the ballroom experience and the engagement that happens within that community, like with testing, with test strips, with HRT supplies. Talk to us about that.
So if you know, you know. So I started my journey with ballroom probably 25 years ago. I'm 41. Now, yeah, I'm 41. But I'm gonna say this. There was a time that I lived in Churchill. I think I was about 22. I worked at 7-Eleven. I had dropped out of college. I had just entered into the ballroom realm. A friend came to my door and he knew that I was a house father, so I used to take all the young kids who wanted to learn how to vogue and do runway and do all of the things that they couldn't do in their home. They came to my door with a young child that was 14 years old, newly diagnosed, and his mom had put him out on the streets. He had a bag and said, I'm going to come back, we're going to get a ticket, I'm going to come back tomorrow, we're going to get things straight. And I was like, I got a TV, a crate, and a mattress, some oodles and noodles, and a bag of potatoes. Unfortunately, they never came back. So without an ID, I reached out to anyone that could help to try to get him back in school, try to reach out to his parents. We had nothing. For the next few years, he stayed with me, and myself and friends raised him as our own. The house. And that's a lot of times when we have these young, especially black men growing up in households that do not have the understanding, do not have the compassion for being who you want to be or desire to be, but now dealing with a disease. It makes the situation that more complicated. When you spoke about, you say, you better not cry. Those are lessons that I was taught too. But now how do you pass those lessons along to these children, a child raising a child? I think the ballroom aids a lot of youth and navigate them to being adults a lot quicker than they should be, because we all enjoyed our childhood or wish we could have enjoyed our childhood. It is an outlet. It's an outlet that has been exposed a lot more in recent days. We deal with so many children across the country. I travel from New York to LA. There are so many different programs that aid in prep, aid in testing, because when you don't have the knowledge, when you don't have the resources, when you don't have the stable home, you tend to go down different paths, as we've been hearing. So I'm very privileged to have the position that I have now. I said that story, but just this morning, I was supposed to be here this morning, but what happened was I got a phone call that one of my youth that's inside of my house currently is facing a new status. So just like years ago it was so prevalent, today it's prevalent. This young man, we signed him up for prep. We moved through the channels with him, and we're here. So there is still work to be done. We work with partners such as Gilead, Vive, any kind of resources.
Talk about what prep is.
Okay, so
I didn't mean to cut you off, but it's important to this conversation.
But
yeah, so PrEP is it stands for pre-exposure prophylaxis. It is a drug. Well, now there are 3 different types of PrEP, but PrEP is a drug that if you take it once a day, it will actually prevent HIV infections from taking hold if the person is exposed. This includes intravenous drug use, unprotected or condomless sex, as well as some of the other lesser means of, like breast milk and breastfeeding. A mother can be on PrEP, and that will actually help her be able to breastfeed, along with some other interventions. But yeah, it's a drug that if you take it once a day, it can actually prevent HIV infections if you're exposed. And there are 2 pills and now also an injectable that you would get. So this is part of PrEP. So I was about to go on a tangent, but part of it is that when you are on PrEP or when you are getting PrEP, automatically your doctor will see you every 3 months to do kidney and liver functionality testing, as well as STI testing. So I love PrEP. I love prescribing PrEP or getting people involved in PrEP because it builds in that routine testing. And routine testing is so important for our young people, for our young Black people, for our young Black gay people, because again, this epidemic is still affecting us at disproportionate rates. And PrEP is probably the best tool next to the condom that we have in ending this epidemic. And then again, like I said, it even works intravenously. So something that AMP knows about and that we know about from our work and from the community. Right now, there is, I mean, it's been a few years now, but there is a surge of drug use and partying and indulging in chemsex. And chemsex is literally sex that you have while you are high off of other things. Right now, the huge party drugs are T or Tina, meth, as well as coke. And depending on how you indulge or how you use, when we're talking about sexual behavior, it's kind of like Hep C. We don't really know what comes first, the chicken or the egg. Are you contracting because you're using, or are you contracting because of sexual behavior? So it all gets tied together. And I love, 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 love the work that we do. We have the CHR team is here. They are phenomenal in their outreach and getting people what they need. And this is something that we have had to discuss as a team and as an agency is, how can we broaden our reach and our scope of understanding while still adhering and maintaining a program? And I think it's something that we have done masterfully. I love it. It's good work, but I'm sorry. But yeah, PrEP, it's a drug.
Oh, don't give me now.
Okay, good night again.
So I definitely knew that Darius would be the perfect person to break that down. But I say all that to say that it's about showing up. It's about being available. It's about being present in those spaces. What I've learned from being a test counselor to a Ryan White case manager is you have to be available. You have to be in those places. We've created so many programs over the years, mandate, PrEP rallies, because a lot of times the access is not there. You have to go outside of, your scope to find it, high or low. So sometimes you have to bring it to individuals, especially youth. They're about partying, they're about having fun. So we're going to mix that together and educate you at the same time. But you have to be able to show up. And what I've learned is that whether I was the guy in the club with the book bag, with the condoms, or whether I was the friend that said, go talk to him. You have to be there. You have to show up. You have to be in those places because people have to feel comfortable. Sometimes it could be what you look like, how you speak, that may turn someone off. It can be an intimidate. I've been in spaces where it has been intimidating for me. So I know when I talk to someone that says, well, I don't understand or I want to know a little bit more about it, then I have to come down to that level and be like, well, let's talk about it. So for me, it's always going to be the solution is how I show up and always being available.
So this is why it's important, right? So I co-coordinate the program with Colin King. Raise your hand, Colin, because we look really different. Colin, white cis guy, Black around the way girl. And sometimes, our approaches to our participants has to be vastly different. And so I've seen the way all of these men up here have, just the relatability to whoever, they read their room. So this is why this was important to me to talk about the ballroom experience, the testing experience, because of the racism that still exists within these medical structures, right? As well as through the clinical structures, right? So let's get back into another clinical question because I want to ask you something. Hold on, let me see which one I'm going to ask you. Oh, Mark, this is a good one. I came up with these questions one night at work. I think I did a good job. Mark, how can we improve representation and diversity within the behavioral health field to ensure that Black men have access to clinicians who understand their experiences and can provide culturally responsive supportive services? So because you spoke about being in long-term recovery, because of your work as a peer, as a social worker, as a CSAC, and what else you got?
MSW.
Okay, I said that.
Supervising and social work.
Okay, all that stuff. How do you get into a place where, the client who is super non-compliant, who has not embraced all that the therapeutic value of clinical service can support, how do you get to this level of a Black guy from Churchill who has grown up, because we talk about things within the Black households. Don't take this outside of my house. Don't talk about this with anybody else. So how do you relate to this person who's so resistant to clinical services? How do you create this path of therapy with them?
Actually, I use my lived experience because I was that person at one time for many years. So, although I respect authority and live by it now, I always didn't. I was the person that will buck on authority. If you tell me to do one thing, I'm going to do the other. And so when I see that person sitting across me or in the same area that I'm in, I'm sorry. When I see that person that you describe, right, I just put myself in their shoes. It's about empathy, being non-judgmental, and trying to find out what needs are they bringing to me at that moment. So a lot of times they could be fearful, like I was for a long time, scared of just facing the consequences of the actions that I had done, and also fearful of just moving forward, fear of success, so and you make me think about, and I got to be vague because some of my coworkers in here, and I don't want to mention anybody that's crossed one of our desks, but it's a particular person that just comes to my mind because at times they could be aggressive, they could be unapproachable, and people don't always know how to handle him, them. I'm trying not to give it away, but I done done it twice. So what I do is I just try to meet them where they are. I always use a way to try to de-escalate them. And I don't allow what they are saying or doing to intimidate the goal that we're trying to reach. So it's just important to just not be a person who, for the lack of better words, just be scared or be fearful of confrontation.
So do you think this is when vernacular comes into play? We have a really
Always.
unique set, AAVE, you know how we talk to each other.
Always.
Okay.
Always. So when so when I'm talking to them, I'm talking to them as someone that's side by side with them. Somebody that's almost in that same situation, but has moved beyond it. So I try to give them hope, to be totally honest. Sometimes it's more difficult than others. Sometimes it takes longer. But at the end of the day, what I show them is my authentic self, and I'm going to show them that I'm going to be there from the beginning through the end. And that's just happened. So to me, that's the best approach. That's the best way, because that's what I needed. I didn't need anybody to put me down or shame or guilt me because of my past or because my behavior didn't equal up to what they thought it was supposed to be.
Thank you. It's important for people to see themselves in the services that they seek, because I was super resistant to some of my counselors when I was in rehab, because you cannot, you don't know where I am. You just can't understand the things that I went through over on St. John Street. You have no idea what St. John Street is. So, just the relatability, right? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Chelsea, you got any questions? Oh, Jihad, where you?
Yeah, I just
No,
want-
come on. Let's
yeah,
talk
no,
about it.
I just wanted, part of the challenge is we know there's limited people who look like us who have similar experience in certain places. So for me, it's about how do we help people who don't have that experience do a better job of helping people whom they're working with. So when Mark was talking, I said foundationally, it's about the relationship. We know therapeutically about change, it's about the relationship. It's not your theoretical orientation, although that should guide you and you should have that, some conceptual understanding of. If a person is presenting in a way that they're angry versus responding to their anger, you should be questioning why they're angry.
Yeah.
And validate their anger. And then you can think about what the intervention is going to be around how to connect with them and build a rapport with them. But if you're sitting there reacting, then you're just going to get the same outcome. Psychodynamic. We're going to get, we're not providing a corrective emotional experience. So really sort of thinking about how do you then approach a person by a place of understanding and curiosity versus judgment. If they're behaving in a certain way, you should be like, what is that about? Let's talk about that so you can better understand it. Then you can build a relationship with them to help facilitate change. And I think, one of the things that we do in the counseling center, we always talk about deliberate practice. How are you deliberately getting better? If I'm meeting with you and doing the work, that's not practice. I'm in the game. What am I doing when I'm not in the game? What am I reading? How am I spending my time self-reflecting? How am I engaging in critical discourse about my own biases that impact or could potentially impact what's going on? So it requires intentionality and a lot of energy to be able to do that. So, that's the thing that I would encourage people to do. It's like, how do you think about you're going to get better? How do you improve so that you can be more effective in helping people? Because if I have a good experience, that could be a pipeline to someone else thinking like, you know what, I could do this. I've seen this, somebody help me, and I think I can do this for someone else.
Thank you. I agree. Chelsea, what you got? Nothing? Anybody got any questions in the audience? Oh.
Yeah, I'm Reggie. I think that we just got into the field of psychotherapy and counseling within the past 30 years. And I think that all of our teaching were Eurocentric, came from another source. And I think that the advent of the new psychodynamics is with you guys, because now you guys will create the new treatment modalities as opposed to those people who taught us. The question is, when you have a psychiatric breakdown that is very traumatic, that's resulting from many sources, who do you go to? And who do you trust with allowing yourself to be vulnerable and expose yourself, especially when you were raised in a situation where you were taught not to divulge who you are?
Is that a question or a comment? Well, I want to say something. Thanks, Reggie, for your comment and question. So that is one of the reasons why I ended up getting into the field of social work, behavior health, outside of actually happenstance when a gentleman and his wife were starting an agency. And they knew that I had just, they knew that I had just got my 4-year degree, and they needed somebody with a 4-year degree to work with them. And so what they did, they placed me in a position just to work with the most difficult clients, right? The clients that were, from public housing. They might have been aggressive. They might have had, prior arrests and conviction, things of that nature. So it helped me to be able to build my skills, right, and learn how to deal and face that, help them through their trauma, because I have been traumatized, whether it's racially, culturally, and and also, through generations, because my family is from Richmond. My mom was born in 1932. My dad was born in 1930. Both of them from Southside, South Richmond. My grandparents were born in the early 1900s. So what they experienced, my grandparents were passed down to my parents, and then, hey, it got passed down to me. So now, with those experiences and knowing different techniques or interventions that I can use to help them, because I've been trained and I also go to therapy myself. I got a black therapist. I think he's the best black therapist in the state, because he's helped me along the way with the many years that I've been seeing him. So I think it's just important that we have more black men in this field. I just finished the program, MSW program in 2023, and I started fall of 2020. So when I started in the fall of 2020, I always had heard through my experience working in mental health that there's not many black men. I used to see it in the office because I was always working around women and always had women supervisors. So it was true. Once I got into the classroom, it won't that many of us. And so, I just wanted to make sure that I was going to be someone that completed the program and had the credentials so that I can help those that look like me.
Yeah, and I would just quickly add, when you talk about helping somebody who might be struggling, might have had a mental health concern or a breakdown, part of it's like a transfer of trust. When you got these brothers in the community who are making connections, for me, this is not a good example, but I and women might if you move somewhere and you know someone, you might say, hey, where do you get your hair done? Because you're just not going to anybody to get your hair done. But if you trust the person and there's, you're more likely to then follow up. So part of it's what are we doing in the communities to connect with people and not sitting in our offices, as you articulated, that we then say we build a relationship and here's the limit of what I can do. But you know what? Let me connect you with this other person, who can help you because I trust them. And then I think that's how we pass it on so people get connected. But we have to have a multi-pronged attack. We got to be in our offices, but we got to have, people out in the community doing the work and building relationships and meeting people where they are so that they can better connect with other resources, because they're just not going to show up to my office and be like, hey, Jihad, I want to see you. It doesn't often work like that. And I mean, I'm sure you can talk about your experiences, or I want to give you the mic. I don't like it.
You didn't want the mic anymore. There's one.
Oh, okay. How much of the don't cry or don't show emotions mentality is generational trauma? Put bluntly, how much of it is survival technique that is passed down generationally to survive oppression or slavery? How do we overcome this?
So I'm not sure how much of it is survivalist. It definitely is conditioning. And I think that is part of what we're talking about at large, is that conditioning and kind of how to face it, but also acknowledge it within yourself and check it and keep the work moving forward. But no, it's something that we all have experienced as black kids. Toughen up. As a gay black man, that was one of the things that I constantly dealt with, was my projection of masculinity, and making sure that it always met the mark. And sometimes it did, sometimes it didn't. But at the end of the day, I had to get to a point in my life where I was willing to acknowledge the things that others may perceive as negatives and realize and accept that for me, those are my cornerstones. Those are the pieces of me that absolutely make me who I am. And at the end of the day, I feel stronger for them, and that I can take these things and use them as foundations in my work and be empowered and reflect in a positive way for individuals coming to us that may not have that yet. But yeah, I think it's conditioning, and that it's something that it is absolutely generational. But I think as a society and as a culture, within the last 10 years or so, the change in acceptance of mental health and toxic culture, toxic behavior, toxic masculinity, all of those things, I think we are now looking at in a different light, in a different lens. And it's really up to us as a people, whether that be Black people, whether that be Richmonders, whether that be Virginians, Americans. It's really up to us to say a lot of the things that we thought were foundations or systems that we have to adhere to, we don't. And some of them, when we break them or when we challenge them, we get so much further as a people and as a community than we would by adhering to them.
Thanks. Let me ask all of you something. This is some stuff I have for the panel. In just a couple of words and a couple of sentences. Mentorship, recruitment, retention, advocacy. What measures do you employ with that? So you spoke about taking some of the club kids under your wing when their families had rejected them. How do you advocate for that? How do people know that you're a safe space? How do people know that?
Community.
Okay.
We speak about community, and if you know anything about it, especially the Black community, we talk. We converse, we'll let you know.
If you know, you know.
Don't go over there. Don't eat that. Don't touch that.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, is to build trust. And like I said, I'm 41. So I remember when I was 18, I was like, oh, that's an old head. I'm not talking to him. So when you start educating and talking to the youth, you utilize them as tools. You take them under your wing and you teach them what you know, but they're able to sit in those circles that you're not allowed in because you're the old head. And they'll be able to pass your message along. You use them as ambassadors in the community, because when that friend say, I don't know what this is that's coming out of me, they be like, well, I know where you can go. You build that trust, you build that bond, and you use the people that you recruit into your circle of trust. We all have it, and in this community it's very important, because if you don't have trust, you don't have anything.
Thanks. Jihad, I want to ask you the same thing. Recruitment and retention. Young
What
Black
answer?
guys here.
I'll say what answer. That's what I'm saying.
Here at VCU, who express an interest in clinical work and behavioral health. How do you, connect with these young brothers here who don't see other men in these positions who look like them, who may not understand what this other person. So how do you make these connections?
Yeah, I think the importance is visibility. You got to be seen. You got to meet them where they are. You got to show up. You got to find ways to connect with them. And and pointed out, you connect with one person and they say, well, you know what, Dr. Aziz is great. You should go talk to him. Most of the referrals I get for Black men who want to come see me is because I saw someone else that they know, and they said, you should go see him. It's okay to talk to him. That's foundational, but it requires me to put the energy, say, well, you know what? Students, they don't do anything till like after 7. I'm like, I'm old. I want to go to bed.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
But if I want to have impact, I better show up. You know what I mean? So, yeah, right, take a nap. Go home, take a nap, get up, and you got to go. I mean, so it requires that intentionality to be present, to be engaged, to be visible, and to build relationships with people and know that they can trust you. And part of it is having integrity, being honest with them, and being your authentic self. And knowing, if at some point I'm not the person who can best help you, how do I get you to the resource that can? I would love to say that I can help anybody who walks in my door, but that's not true, because we might be in different places. and they might need something different than what I can provide. It might not be a black man. It might not be a cisgender. It might be one of my colleagues who has a different identity. And my responsibility is not to have my ego involved, is to say, you know what, I'm invested in your success and you getting what you need. I don't care where you get it. So fire me and let me get you to the resources that's going to heal you. Because if it's not me and I'm trying to keep you there, I'm doing a disservice. And that's not my purpose in life.
You need this.
For the men on the panel, is there a drastic difference between the treatment language and therapy for people of color versus that of other ethnic groups that should be considered when helping individuals in this field?
So we were talking about this earlier, vernacular and how we speak and how we show up. I will say this. If you don't know it, don't get into a space and try to be hip. Like, I don't mean to say this like that. I don't know who asked the question, but just be yourself, be humble, be personable. And if there are those differences and you're feeling those differences, guess what? You're not the only one. As a provider, you're not the only one feeling those differences. So if you try to address that by overcompensating, they've checked out. You've lost them. So I don't think it's that we have different languages or that we speak about things differently, or that we should try to understand that. I mean, sure. I hear that there are college courses on Ebonics. So, go, have at it. But at the same time, even when I get into a space and when I get into a session, it's really about feeling where the person is and if they're understanding, not dumbing it down, but don't think you have to dumb it down, but just present it in a way that is digestible. Maybe you don't start off with the technical terms. Maybe you as a provider, as a doctor, as a counselor, there are ways that you should be able to tweak that message so that it's receivable without it going over the heads of the people that we're helping and serving. Sorry.
Yeah, so if you're not African American, don't use AAVE. Please don't. Right. Google that.
No, what's up, Shawty?
Yeah, please, don't do that. Keith Murphy.
Zico,
Yo.
how you doing?
Hey, I'm good.
This is a great panel. Question, how do you all deal with your own internal isms? Because they do come up. How do you process them? How do you work through them? And how do you know when they show up when you're with yourself or working with other folks?
That was a great question. Self-examination, man. Continuously inventorying myself, checking my biases, sharing with others who work in this field, building a network of people who trust, love, and encourage me so that I can be just open and honest with them. That helps me to definitely move past any biases that I might have, because they might show up. I believe everybody got a certain button that if somebody find that button and push it, you might get a reaction. But I'm grateful that, and I just got to use Reggie as an example, because Reggie was my supervisor, man, when I was working in the treatment center, and I had a couple of issues with counter transference. And he just helped me along the way. He was patient with me, and he taught me, he set me down, and he was like, look, you don't have to react to all those situations, And so someone like that is a perfect example to me of how to get past it.
Brown and white.
Thank you, Mark. So I will say that I'm the product of it. I'm a work in progress. Mark said he know one of the best therapists, black therapists in Virginia. Probably going to be nudging him later. This is something that I've struggled with for a long time, because at an early age, I had to grow up really fast. Me and my mother are It's 14 years apart. So I didn't have a real childhood. That's why what I do in ballroom as being a father, as being a leader, it comes natural. I think for a long time, I take care of everybody around me. And at this late stage in my life, it started to weigh down on me. Far as work, far as life. And I am the product of it. And I'm working towards it. And I don't have a solution. I don't, and I love what Darius said. If you don't know, don't speak on it. But I love the question. I think the question was really meant for me. But thank you.
Hi.
We have time for Sheikah real quick, and then I think we got to wrap this up.
Okay, so I want to speak to what Mark was saying about when he was coming through pursuing his career and going to classes and he wasn't identifying or seeing men of color in the rooms, right? For me, a person in recovery, and I'm working in the field now, I have a criminal history, right? But like, I try not to be resentful of the fact that there is a depopulation, right? What a Caucasian man might get arrested for, he could get sentenced to 5 or 10 years. But if an African American young man gets arrested for the exact same thing, he's gonna get life or maybe 45, 50 years, right? So I feel like that there's an attack on the youth, right? And so maybe that's why we're not able to see them. Like, what programs or what can we do as a community or society to like get them while they're young, to stop them with the gang activities and the drugs and the risk taking? Like, what can we do, or how can y'all, what do y'all feel about that?
One word. One word from each of y'all. I'm gonna hold it.
Go past.
Okay. One word.
Family.
Empathy.
Community.
Modeling the behavior. That's 3 words.
I'm sorry we couldn't get to everybody. Mr. Reggie, they looking at me and holding up stuff like I'm on Showtime at the Apollo. Thank you so much. This is a love letter from me to the men who do this work, to this illustrious panel, to Keith Murphy, to Edward Peters, to Kenny Harris, to Jeff in the back, Victor McKenzie, if he's still in here. I appreciate y'all. Y'all set the tone for me. All the tropes and stereotypes that I go through, y'all protect me, and I wanted to give some love to y'all, so thank you. Thanks for listening.